But the main talking point coming from this story is the person that you heard no talking from on this show, and it was the absence of Chris Charlton on commentary, because the show begins and it was Walker Stewart solo, and then they didn't have Rocky Romero because Romero worked in the main event 8-man, and then midway through the show TJP came on and did commentary. So at one point in the show, Jeff Cobb is out for, this was after his match that he was involved in, and he walks up to Walker Stewart and he asks Walker, "Why are you alone out here?" And Walker Stewart can't say anything, and Cobb just warns him to watch what you say. And Walker's response is, "I guess we all need to." And so we're watching this, and I'm busy like asking around, seeing like if there is something here. And you know, it subsequently has come out that like Chris Charlton was pulled from this show. I was told by one person that it was a 2-month suspension, and I was asking around trying to confirm that. I have not confirmed that, although that's what Fightful has reported as well, the 2-month suspension. Mm-hmm. Dave Meltzer has stated it's an indefinite hiatus. Either of the two, he was removed from this show, and it was very obvious because when Chris is not on the shows, it's usually because they're out, like he works in the office, but he does not miss the Tokyo shows, and much less a Dash show, which is a really important show. So right there, it was, you know, coming off of everything. But I will tell you, and I spoke about this on the review, like I found some of the commentary to be a lot. It was just, like my personal like enjoyment of the commentary. I really enjoy Chris Charlton's work, and I just found it to be a lot over the top. By no means did I listen to anything and think like this is some kind of punishable issue that we're talking about here. So I was very surprised by this. We do not know all the specifics other than it does appear that Chris was removed from the show, and there was obviously issues with the commentary that he had on the show directed at AEW. There was, for one, and I do want to stress this point because the way I heard it was the money mark line that a lot of people have referred to. If you listen to it, he is stating that, you know, what Gabe Kidd had said was, and then he was kind of just paraphrasing and used the money mark term. Granted, there were plenty of other comments that Chris Charlton had against AEW. What I could say, though, is that to your point, Wei, I don't doubt for a minute that this was in service of the story, that Chris Charlton was executing this. I don't think there was anything, like you're out there and you're selling a story, and yeah, sometimes you might say things that are going to be a little too close to the bone, but you're trying to sell something. This is like the Hangman Page line against CM Punk. I don't doubt that Hangman was trying to sell a match and use something real, but if the person taking it has the wrong reaction, well, there can be negative fallout. And unfortunately, that's what it seems like here with Chris Charlton. And
yeah.
So why don't you share some of your thoughts?
Just wanted to add maybe some other sort of context to like some of the occurrences. We had Tony Schiavone in a now deleted tweet.
I thought Schiavone came off terrible with that comment he made today. I thought, honestly, if you were to tell me, if you were to say that one company got so upset with one of their employees that Charlton is facing a punishment for this, I don't know how you don't have an issue with this. Was just...
Yeah, just reading the tweet. This was at about 4:00 in the afternoon, and he since deleted it. Tony Schiavone tweets, "Hey, at Reason JP, which is Chris Charlton's handle, speaking for all of us in AEW, GFY, and speaking for all of us who have been around you, take a shower once in a while." So...
Like that to me was just so unprofessional.
I mean, the way I read it, I took it to mean more angle. Listen, this is professional wrestling. You can never really tell. You can never tell what's seriously heated. I tend to give Tony the benefit of the doubt in thinking that, okay, a guy like who's been around the industry for that long, knowing like what he's doing with these words, like a line like take a shower once in a while. Like I just thought it was some way of like building towards a rivalry that may eventually see its end.
Tony Schiavone versus Chris Charlton?
Well, just some sort of inter-promotional like grudge that they could settle for Forbidden Door, for instance. I mean, that was my speculation. The fact that he since deleted it, I don't know what you think of it, but listen, at this point, it's like, I think I'm shocked that this has gotten this much press, and obviously with the suspension, it's only ramped it up.
They blew it up to be a much bigger story than it needed to be. Like this, if Charlton was, listen, there was a lot of discourse about his commentary, and a fair amount of it was negative. But if he had just done New Year Dash, that was a one-day Twitter story, and now you've just made it into a much bigger thing than it needs to be. the issue here is that you're talking about two companies that are business partners together. And it is worth noting, Chris Charlton is also an office worker. And I do feel he just ended up in the line of fire here. And I don't agree with the notion of, taking this guy off your broadcast. First of all, I think it hampers like your broadcast. Like you have your translator here that you're taking off, and I think Chris Charlton is a really talented broadcaster that you're harming your own product by removing him. And again, it took this story that was only going to exist on Twitter overnight until the next thing happens, and I think you just made it a lot bigger than it needed to be.
I think also worth noting, I believe in the Fightful report, they had also stated that they had heard that it was a strictly New Japan call and not a Tony Khan call.
Yeah.
So I mean that I don't think, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Tony like didn't care about it at all and maybe just thought like I did that it was just working his storyline.
I've heard nothing regarding Tony Khan's reaction to it, but it seemed consistent to me like this was ultimately it's New Japan making this call.
Yes. And I think there are a lot of like things about like the way the Japanese run their businesses, especially with people that are like talking about business partners, whether or not in character, that I don't understand. That is just not as maybe evident to all of us here as it may be for Japanese culture. So I think we have to take all of that into account. But clearly Chris overstepped the line, and New Japan can do what they want. Like audiences can maybe speculate about whether or not you agree with it.
How do you feel like also with the Gabe Kidd video that one of the promos he cuts? I mean, it's almost verbatim like what Chris picked up on, and right to like going like insulting AEW and people being brought there and stuck in catering. Like it wasn't a whole lot different.
Gabe Kidd's promo was him playing a heel, and I've read a lot of discourse, especially on our video that we put up, and a lot of people were unhappy with my comparison to Nigel McGuinness doing it versus like Chris Charlton doing it, because they felt Nigel was an established heel, or at least like a heel commentator, or at least wasn't as overbearing as Chris was throughout the entirety of the show. I personally maintain that like he's in a role, Chris, where I think he can occasionally slightly play more favorite, especially when we're talking about like, remember the Noah shows?
Yeah, but
he was very he was pro New Japan Pro Wrestling in those.
Oh, he was,
too.
And him and Kevin Kelly received a lot of criticism for that too. That it was just, I don't think that's necessarily what people want from their commentators.
But is it a suspendable offense? Like,
no, it's not. And again, if you want to listen to our thoughts after the show but before this news came out, like I just thought the comment, it was too much. I didn't like the comment about he took all these wrestlers and he barely does anything with them. Like, what does that mean in a pro wrestling sense? Like, it's making these wrestlers,
you can bench wrestlers in a pro wrestling sense,
but he's not, and it's, I don't know, to me it's like,
but again, that's what Gabe Kidd said, right? In Gabe
it is,
promo.
but there's obviously different rules here of Gabe Kidd selling a match versus Chris Charlton calling a match. I'm not saying that's fair.
Yeah, should there be?
Well, I don't know what direction Chris had. If Chris was told, hey, no bashing AEW, then yeah, he would be in the wrong. I don't think that was the case. And if he was just thrown out there and he's got to use his instincts, which a lot of commentators have to do, you're flowing with the story. And sometimes,
especially for international language, like non-mainline,
it's
commentators.
Like, yeah, you might step on something that you shouldn't have. That's kind of like what the gig is at sometimes. And it should be something like, yeah, you could say, hey, that's not something we want to be encouraging. Don't do it again, versus taking action here. I think he was in a position, if Chris Charlton just went off the Gabe Kidd promos and used that as fuel for this story that I'm tasked with telling as the New Japan office representative on commentary. Again, I do not at all agree with like a punishment over this. But I mean, that obviously New Japan had a different sense of things, and I don't think we know the full extent and the full details of all of this, and if there's aspects that need to be filled in to make more sense of this. But that was a very notable story coming out of Dash. This month at postwrestlingcafe.com, it's your home for XL editions of Rewind a Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown as we go live for our patrons on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with XL editions containing the news of the day, questions, and feedback. And throughout the month of January, you get a free month when you sign up for a full year. postwrestlingcafe.com.